What's up, y'all? All right, so the Oakland Raiders have traded for Geno Smith, sending a third-round pick, chump change, to the Seattle Seahawks for Gino Smith, reuniting him with Pete Carroll, and I love this move for the Raiders, all right? I think this is a great move, and as I was thinking about it on the way home last night from work, I'm like, man, this just makes too much sense for the Raiders as far as what I think the Raiders should be doing in the draft. This is a draft channel, so I'm always going to take it to what does it mean for the Raiders' sixth pick in the draft? What does it mean for the rest of their draft? So I wanted to get on here and just do a little bit of a 7-round mock. Now, I don't know a lot of the names in the 7th round, so it might get a little silly at the end, but first 5 rounds I feel pretty good about. First 4 we're going to feel really confident about. So we're going to go ahead, do a mock draft, and as I'm doing the mock draft, I want to talk about all of the different things that this Geno Smith trade might mean for this draft class. All right, let's get right into it. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. We are just going to do this on the PFF mock draft simulator. We're going to control Oakland, and what I'll have to do is trade the 3rd round pick when we get to it, but I'll do that a little bit later. Let's go ahead and start the draft. So 6th pick in the draft, just see what happened here. I mean, this feels very realistic, right? I do think Cam Ward's going to go number 1. Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter should be the next 2 guys taken off the board. Look, I understand the Browns and Giants both need a quarterback. I think free agency is going to figure some of this out. I don't think both of these teams are going to go in the draft needing quarterback. And just to be 100% honest with you, I don't know that I believe that the NFL sees Shedeur Sanders as a guy who's worth a top 3 pick. So I'd just be really surprised if we saw 2 quarterbacks go in the top 2 picks. So this is actually the exact scenario that I wanted to see, right? A lot of really, really good talent here, in my opinion. Obviously, you got the number 1 defensive tackle still on the board. You got the number 1 wide receiver, although I would never consider McMillan here. Obviously, we are in a rebuild situation. You could go corner. You could go a lot of different ways here, and I understand that. The 2 scenarios that I really want to talk about that I want to bring to the center of this conversation, one, they could go get Shedeur Sanders, all right? Shedeur Sanders is on the board, and I understand that's going to be something that a lot of Raiders fans might want because you could sit him behind Geno for a year, do the full, hey, you're not starting, Geno's our guy, and kind of go that route for the year. And look, I think there's a lot of value to that. I think it'd be a really good thing for Shedeur Sanders' career if he could sit behind a starter for a year. And look, I think at a certain point, the Raiders are going to have to look at the quarterback position. They're going to have to take a shot on quarterback at some point in this draft. They have a ton of picks, whether it is the 6th pick in the draft and they take the eventual successor of Geno Smith, or if they just kind of take a lottery pick later on in the draft, maybe Jackson Dart in the 2nd, maybe, a Quinn Ewers or the Louisville kid in like the 4th or 5th. Those are all going to be conversations that we talk about, and I think I would like those lottery picks a little bit more than passing on a premium talent in the 1st round. So instead, what I'm going to do, and I just genuinely believe this is a real possibility, this is why I wanted to make the video, I'm going to let the Oakland Raiders take Ashton Jeanty with the 6th pick in the draft. I think he is by far and away kind of a top 3 player in this class. If you just take positional value, take everything else out of the conversation, it's Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, and Ashton Jeanty. However order you want to place it. Now, Jeanty will be the 3rd guy drafted of those 3 because he plays the least valuable position from a draft value standpoint. And I understand drafting a running back top 10, it's going to come with some question marks. We've seen Oakland spend 1st round picks on running backs before. It's worked out, but it hasn't led to playoff wins by any means. Now, that's a different era. That was the start of the Mike Mayock era when they drafted Josh Jacobs, and they drafted him with one of their 3 first-round picks that they had that year. So it was a little bit of a different situation. I understand that. I think looking at what Pete Carroll loves to do, looking at what the ownership I think would want to turn towards, I think a running back in this spot after handling your quarterback situation, their offensive line I don't think as bad as it ultimately could be. I think they did really well with Jackson Powers-Johnson last year in the 2nd round. I think they have pieces to where, yeah, you could consider offensive line if a Will Campbell or a Mbao or whoever you like was there, but I don't think if the board fell this way, I don't think you would take the 3rd offensive lineman. I say all that to say I am going to take Ashton Jeanty at this spot. I think it makes the most sense. I honestly believe if the board fell this way, we would have to take the running back with the sixth pick in the draft. I really believe that. I think the Raiders would do that, and I've already placed a bet on FanDuel to have Ashton Jeanty go to the Raiders. All right, and I made a, not a huge one, but I do think this is a real possibility. So I'm going to go ahead and send it here. And I hope I at least explained kind of the thought process of it, the different places you could go. Obviously, they could go any different direction they want. I think that direction makes a lot of sense. So with the second round, I think we have a ton of talent that I really like still here. This is where, okay, do we want to improve the offensive line? Maybe. I'm not the biggest fan. I'm not the biggest fan of this wide receiver class. So I go into the second round and I'm like, man, this class, top of the second round, Aya Maynard's not a guy that I think I would take there. I really look at this entire board and I'm like, okay, Trey Harris, this is way too early for Trey Harris. I haven't finished the TCU kids, so I don't speak on them, but they're like the guys that I'm watching later today, so I will just hold off on going that route. Obviously, you could consider it. I think you're going to have to consider quarterback. That's a big thing, right? We're going to have to consider Okay, well... Shedeur Sanders is still here in this mock. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we're going to do that. We're going to do that because he's still available. And, man, I hate that because I don't know how real that is. Okay, so they have the Browns taking Jackson Dart over Shedeur. That's interesting. That's interesting that PFF is letting that happen because, I mean, I understand this is just an app and maybe it's not fully transparent, but I gotta think that that's a real possibility. Now, I was thinking Jackson Dart in this spot. I really was. I think you could make a case for a Milroe in this spot if you were really willing to let him sit for a year and learn how to be a quarterback. He has an explosive arm, and he's a legit athlete. He's just not a quarterback yet, right? You're teaching an athlete to be a quarterback. That's had pros and cons, but he has enough of the tools of just natural skill. Like, he can throw the ball. Like, he's not a lost cause by any means. He's just not accurate enough and not consistent enough by any stretch of the imagination to think that he can go in and be an NFL quarterback in the 2025 season. He's not there. But he's a total project, and I think you would think about it. I really think he's going to be the fourth quarterback off the board after Shedeur, Jackson Dart, and obviously Cam Ward, who I believe will be the first pick in the draft. This is the next guy. And I understand a lot of people that watched Alabama last year probably aren't going to feel that way. But, yeah, I'm sitting here telling you he's not a finished product by any means, but he has enough tools to where the best-case scenario for Jalen Milroe is better than any other player in this class, right? Just because of the electric ability to make plays with his legs and his arm if he were able to really develop as a passer. That's extreme, but I do think that's in the conversation. I want to look at some other names just in case. Now, I'll tell you, I think TJ Sanders, Tyleik Williams, these names would have been really considered if I didn't have a Shedeur Sanders still sitting here. So I'm going to play it out, and we're going to go ahead and just draft Shedeur Sanders. I don't think there's any other way you could do this. Now, let's say they flipped it and just if they did take the quarterback in the first, if they took Shedeur with the sixth pick, which I sat there and told you I would think about, I would not be shocked at all if a Judkins, Omarion Hampton could be here. It looks like in this mock he goes a lot earlier, although I could see LA doing that too, actually. But Judkins, Caleb Johnson, even Dylan Sampson, all names that I would consider here. Now, it's almost to the point where there's just too many names. It's like, let's see if one of these guys falls to the third round. But I would have considered that as well. And I don't think I would hate it either way, but obviously this is the best case scenario possible for the Raiders. You get a Shedeur Sanders with, a definite NFL high-level starting quarterback upside. Pair him with a Geno Smith. I love that. Those are like the two scenarios that I thought were possible. We're going to do them both in this mock, and we're going to go ahead. I did want to at least talk about the other options, the other possibilities. And guys, I'm going to be honest with you, as of recording this, I'm not exactly sure which third-round pick they traded. Was it the 38th or the 73rd? I'm going to imagine that it was the 73rd, so I'm going to treat this as their actual pick, and then we could go back and look at this. So, obviously, we got the running back and the quarterback. I would want to at least consider addressing the defensive side of the ball, so I want to see, do we have any cornerbacks that I like in the third? Benjamin Morrison is really, really interesting. He's just had 2 hip injuries, one in high school, one in college. And according to everything I've heard, and I don't have any like legit sources, but I do have a friend that is close to the Notre Dame facility, and he's only hearing what everybody's hearing in that facility. It's not super, super deep in information, but according to everything they're putting out there, he's good. He's good to go, and he's going to be fine, and they're not super worried about it. But let's be honest, that's the message they would send, okay? So I take that with a grain of salt. He's a name I'm going to consider, okay? Because I think his upside, his swivel, he has legit CB1 upside, but there's some legit injury concerns there, and again, I would consider him in the third. I think if there were no injury concerns, you'd be thinking he's a borderline top 50 pick, I would say. So you're getting a little bit of a discount with the risk. But even then, I don't know how much of that's not probably enough of a discount unless there's just no other names that I love here. So that's corner. I'm going to go ahead and look at edge. I want to look at edge just for a second. Man, and again, I'm never going to bullshit you guys on this. Like, I'm not going to sit here and look at all these names. I have a full-time job. Every single name on this list, I'm just not super familiar with. The names I am super familiar with, I don't love in the third. I just don't. I just want to look at the offensive lineman. So this is what I'd be between. I'm probably between Marcus Mbo over here from Purdue. Big, long, lengthy tackle who I think like he could stand to add a little bit more strength in his upper body for sure. But I mean, I like his movement skills a lot. I look at this guy as a guy who you could probably move him inside and he'd just be, kind of a monster guard. But I really believe he could work as a tackle as well. I think he has upside as a tackle. A little bit of a raw prospect though, so not like he should be in this range. I think this is a guy I would bet on a guy like this in the third round. Man, I wish we had both thirds. If we had both thirds, I know exactly what I'm doing. I think the Raiders would probably take corner. I think that's kind of where I'm at with it. I think there's enough names in the offensive line room where like you're gonna get into the 4th and 5th round. You're just taking shots on potential. But I like Morrison a lot. I'm gonna bet on the fact that his hip is good. This guy has the widest range of outcomes in the draft for a guy like me because I'm obviously never going to know about his medicals. And honestly, even if I did, I probably wouldn't advertise it either just because that's a dude's personal information. Although I'd probably be hyping him up if I knew he was all set there. So I don't know. I'm going to bet on that. And then I'm going to just go ahead and trade this away. Give that trade to the Seahawks. Let's resume the draft. And then we're going to come up into the 4th round. Ooh. This is an interesting spot in the 4th round. I think I like Isaiah Bond here. Although, I don't know. Tez Johnson, Isaiah Bond, similar type of players. I'm more in love with an Isaiah Bond over a Tez Johnson personally. Bond just has a ton of playmaking ability with his hands. He's a limited wide receiver though. He's almost a gadget wide receiver. So if I look at wide receiver here, Troy Horton makes a lot of sense to me. He's another guy where it's like, man, he's got a ton of potential to be like a really good number 2 in the league. I kind of look at it like that. Interesting there. I'm gonna put that on the back burner. So this is what I want to do. I want to look at quarterback here real quick. I do want to say just really quick, if we wouldn't have been able to grab a quarterback in the 2nd, this is the range where a Quinn Ewers, So I don't know, but a really, really good player. Not an explosive arm by any means, but like feels like he has good NFL quarterback traits and could be a really good player in the league. I really like Royke here too. Like he feels like a little bit of. I mean, you would never draft him in the 4th. Just as a fan, like I feel like he's going to sneak in the 7th round and be one of those like career backups for a lot of years. That's like my guess for him. That's a little off topic, but I just wanted to point that out. We're not doing that in this mock, obviously, because we don't need to, but it's worth mentioning that that's something we would have probably considered. Well, we obviously don't need tight end. So with that said, I'm looking at these spots and I do think Isaiah Bond has a special athletic profile that you're just not seeing from many other players in the 4th round. So that's why like he's really, really interesting to me. He's really, really interesting to me. The UCLA edge is a name I kind of like. Let me look at the edge rushers. I wanted to help out Max Crosby. I really did. I wanted to add another name on that list, and they've got a lot of pieces there. Yeah, it's just nobody in the fourth. Nobody in the fourth. Even Robinson here out of Alabama, I don't believe in him in this range. I just don't. Let's go ahead and get Isaiah Bond here. Look, I think this is kind of the top of his range for me as far as where I see him going. I like him in this range because I do think he's an explosive playmaker and he has the potential to grow. It's kind of your like slot receiver, but like his ceiling is like Tyler Lockett-ish. I would love him. Like, if he turns into Tyler Lockett, that's amazing. Well, Pete Carroll's familiar with that type of guy, right? So I think there's a little bit of kumbaya there. I like that. We're going to go ahead and lock that in just because I like that. I think that's a big need for the Raiders. Let's go ahead and get into the 5th round where we're going to start kind of getting a little weird because this is where we get into the range of like, I don't know a ton of these names. All right, this is a flashy draft. Now, look, I will say just looking at where we're at right now, would like a little bit more meat and potatoes, would have liked to address the trenches at some point. I believe in attacking the trenches early in every single draft, so that's just going to be something that I'm always going to talk about. In this class, just the way it fell, I made the decision that we were going to go Ashton Jeanty, and then the second where I probably would have gone offensive line if Shedeur Sanders wasn't available, but Shedeur Sanders fell, and again, I kind of already talked about how I don't think that's crazy. We ended up going for the high upside in a Benjamin Morrison, and I just couldn't pass up on Isaiah Bond to add to the complement of weapons that are already there, and at Brock Bowers, I think he could be a really good piece there. All right, so I'm really excited about what they've done. At least if this is how it played out, I think you are adding, you're creating the foundation of what your team is going to be from an offensive standpoint, as far as like the way you're going to win games. You're going to win games through Ashton Jeanty, and then the short kind of completions with a little bit of the ability. Obviously, Isaiah Bond can stretch the defense as well. He has that game-breaking speed. I just like him more as kind of a gadgety slot type of guy early on in his career, at least. I think he'd have to develop some of the other aspects of his game. So that feels like you're developing an identity, and for a Raiders team that hasn't had an identity in a long time, I'd love for them to get back to that. So with that said, let's go ahead and add a little bit of meat and potatoes. I'm going to look at offensive line and defensive line, and specifically I want interior D-line, and we're going to go that route with this pick here in the 5th round. All right, let's go ahead and take the high upside of a Seth McLaughlin here. I mean, look, he had the injury. I know he's played center at Ohio State. I think you can move him over to guard. Ton of snaps, veteran guy, can play all over the interior offensive line. But I think he had the Achilles injury near the late part of the season last year, so he's not going to be ready for the 2025 season. I'm comfortable with that. I'm okay with that. Let him get a year. Again, I know we're kind of taking chances, but yeah, we're swinging for the fences in a draft class that I think, man, if we just hit on one of these guys, you're going to be super happy. And in the 5th round, the upside for him in the 5th round is insane. Getting into the 6th, I love how the one problem with PFF is PFF doesn't let teams that have an established quarterback just take guys like this, because Queen Ewers isn't going to last the 6th round. We're not going to go over that route just because we already took the quarterback. I do want to look at some other positions here, and this is kind of what I was thinking. Love the names in this range, man. Tootin will not go in the 6th round. Tootin's going to go way before that. I mean, his blend of power and speed is real. Now, Virginia Tech ran like 3 runs plays all year, basically, and he just crushed defenses all year with it. Tootin's going to rise up draft boards. I really believe that. I like Jordan James a lot. I'm going to do a draft profile on him. Like, literally, the next video I do is going to be him. Tootin, I've already done a video on. Ollie Gordon, I've already done a video on. So, like, I got a lot of these guys that I'm pretty comfortable knowing about, and Tootin, I think, is going to be he could go in the 4th round. You could have switched his pick out for Isaiah Bond. That makes a lot of sense for me. So obviously we already took Ashton Jeanty. I'm not interested in taking Ashton Jeanty in the 6th round and then, using him 500 snaps for the first 3 seasons and just killing his entire career, right? Like, I'd like to be able to spell him a little bit, and there's just nobody on that roster that I really want to prioritize for the 2025 season. If they can make the roster and they can be a part of the running back room, great, that's fine. But I mean, you got career backups that were starting at the end of last year, and I definitely think in this class you can take 2 running backs. You don't have to take the first one with the 6th overall pick, but a Raiders team that needs running backs, it's a dream situation. Take 2, take 3. You got 3 picks in the 6th round. If all 3 of them are running backs, especially if you didn't go running back at any other point in this draft, take 3 in the 6th, and I promise you got a starter. You got 1 starter and a couple good backups. Like, that's how deep and good this running back class is. So I'm a big believer in that. We really might go ahead and do that, but let's go ahead and look at some other positions. Tootin, I don't know if I could pass up. You know what? Look, we got 3 picks in the 6th round. We're gonna kind of run through the last couple picks just because we're kind of getting deep and we're running out of names that I'm really aware of. So I'm gonna take Tootin because there's a tier gap there, and we're just gonna have a little bit of fun with it here. All right, and like I said, we're gonna go ahead and run through this. I'm gonna grab them a defensive tackle because I've been talking about it this entire class. Again, we're out of kind of the range of good names that I'm super familiar with, so I'm just gonna take the top name off the board and go with that. I do think the Raiders would address their defensive line at some point in this class, and this is the type of class where it's like, okay, you're going to get late into day 3, and there's going to be guys that are going to fill a role on your defense that project to be really good at filling certain roles. 3 down guys, obviously, you're not going to find late in the 6th round unless you just, you just get lucky. Like the true gems, obviously, those are always possible. But as far as what you would project to the NFL, yeah, that's about right. I feel good about that. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and grab another offensive lineman because I'm just a big believer in that. Let's just take the Georgia kid here because I don't know enough about him. Yeah, 6'7", senior. Didn't love Georgia's offensive line, so maybe not the best pick. And then we're going to finish it out. I know I'm kind of shortchanging you a little bit with the 7-round mock. I'm going to finish it out with this Alabama safety because Malachi Moore, I thought he was a fine safety. All right, guys, let's go ahead and look at this draft class. One last look before we finish out this video. Ashton, Jeanty at the top of the class. Look, that was kind of why I wanted to make this video. I really believe this is a real possibility. I think there's a real chance they would look at this, looking at what Pete Carroll likes to do. They're not scared to draft a running back in the 1st round, looking at just the ability to change the identity of your team with 1 pick. Ashton Jeanty can do that. I would love that. And then in this scenario, obviously, Shedeur Sanders falls to you in the 2nd round. You take him in the range that I think a lot of NFL teams would feel really comfortable. Obviously, NFL teams would feel really comfortable. I think the conversation about him being in the same, class as the number 1 pick in the class, that's kind of died down. That was a lot of just, smoke screen and talk from a guy who had a good college career, obviously very loud up there in Colorado. This is more kind of the reality of, I think, the way I definitely, I was nervous about saying he was in the class, but to me, if we were going to say Shedeur Sanders was the top of the class, it's just not a good class, right? We still know that. Cam Ward is still a ton of question marks. To just say that he's the number 1 guy, it makes sense in this class, but it's bold. So I say all that to say you're getting a huge discount on a guy that I absolutely think could fall here. Would the Raiders probably have to trade up and get him at the back end of the 1st just to land their guy, especially in a certain NFL dynamic where there's a lot of teams that I think would consider taking him and sitting him behind their veteran for a year or 2. So yeah, probably, but this isn't crazy to me. I want to make that clear. This isn't crazy for me. And then we'll run through the rest here. Benjamin Morrison, high upside guy who I think could go a lot earlier if he didn't have those hip injuries. Isaiah Bond, I think, just add a little bit of juice to an offense that's missing juice. Love the Seth McLaughlin pick just because he's, look, I guess PFF doesn't like it. Again, high upside. You're going to move him to guard. I don't want him at center. I love Jackson Powers-Johnson there at center, but just, again, you got to add some meat to that offensive line at some point, and I'm taking the upside of a guy who did have the injury but would have gone a lot earlier if it wasn't for that injury. Tootin, never going to be there in the 6th round. Had to take that, and I really believe the Raiders will take 2 running backs in this class as long as they don't, give up a lot of assets to move up. And then throughout the rest of the draft, look, like I said while I was drafting it, those are not the names I'm the most familiar with, but I wanted to at least be a little bit realistic to, look, I have a full-time job. I do this with all my free time. I love making draft profile videos. I love talking about the draft as much as I possibly can, but I'm not going to bullshit you and act like I know about the 220th guy on the PFF board. I don't. I'm not that deep. I'm probably like 150 to 160 as far as guys and names that I feel really good about. But all right, guys, hope you like that. Let me know in the comments what you want to see the Raiders do. Tried to go as in-depth as I could about all the different possibilities and thought processes that kind of go along with each pick. So hopefully you enjoyed that. Thank you so much for watching. Peace.